Obviously, since I run a YouTube channel about, teaching people about the various languages of the world, I am quite a big fan of languages, and so I thought it would be interesting and a good low effort video idea to try and rank my top 10 favorite languages. I'm not going to dilly-dally, I'm just going to get right into it. Number 10 on the list is
Haitian Creole. Basically, what happened was, however many hundreds of years ago, France invaded wherever Haiti is. I know it's an island, but I don't know if it's like multiple islands or like half of an island. I don't know. Either way, Haiti, right? The French invaded it, brought some slaves over with them. They had slaves working and they had French people bossing them around, so they had to figure out how to communicate. Not just all the slaves speaking various African languages and the French people speaking French, but also with all of the slaves speaking different African languages and having to learn not only to communicate between them and the French people, but between each other as well. And so you have this perfect situation for the formation of a pidgin, which eventually, through some vague process, ended up as being a Creole. And so that's number one reason I like Haitian Creole, is because it's got a really interesting history behind it, how it developed and such. I have to drop the energy down because I don't know what energy level I'm going to be filming the next segment at. I do actually, because I filmed that segment 3 weeks ago. Anyway, the next language on the list is Russian. I like Russian for a variety of reasons. One of those is the case system. Russian uses a lot of cases. The cases are just interesting. A lot of people find them really difficult and annoying when they're learning Russian, but from a purely linguistic standpoint, not only are they really interesting, but they're also just cool and neat. Russian also just holds like a special sentimental place in my heart because it was the first language that I really tried to learn. I only tried on Duolingo. This was I was about 15 when I tried learning Russian, so I didn't know anything about language learning and doing it properly, but I gave it a go. It's what really began my linguistic journey, I started learning Russian during lockdown, and then I got really into language learning, and then I tried learning the local language around where I live, which is Badimaya, and then that just sort of evolved and eventually I ended up here with an early offer into university for linguistics, and that's awesome. And one final thing I like about Russian is, the perspective it gives, because if you learn a language, you learn a worldview as well. Russians are often viewed as very scary and mainly other. They're especially due to the actions of the country in recent years, they are definitely the other in most people's minds at the moment. And so just being able to overcome that cultural barrier that sort of divides us from people who just so happen to speak Russian as their birth language, just being able to overcome that divide is something that I think is really special. Anyway, the next language on the list is number 8, which is Piraha. Any linguistics nerd will be familiar with Piraha. It's an Amazonian language spoken by 800 people, 500, it's in the hundreds, and pretty vague number. A few hundred people in the Amazon, and it's famous for absolutely throwing a bunch of shit into the air about universal grammar. But honestly, the controversy is probably the most boring part of Piraha. What I'm really interested in is the actual language itself. If it does have recursion and the whole universal grammar thing is unfounded, it's still fascinating language in terms of its grammar. Basically a bunch of grammar that I just cannot wrap my head around, and I've looked at texts of Piraha, of interlinear glosses and everything, perfectly set up to try and decode this grammar and get my head around it, and I just can't. It's so complicated and difficult and multi-layered and just absolutely inscrutable from my perspective as an Anglophone who's only studied Indigenous Australian languages in depth. And honestly, I think that's really cool because Piraha, as a result of being so grammatically fucked, is just a great display of the sheer diversity that is possible with human language. I also think it just sounds neat. There's a common theme on this list is I just like listening to the languages being spoken, even if I've got no concept of what's being said. Sometimes I'll just put on that one video of a dude speaking Piraha on YouTube in the background as I'm doing something else. One last thing I really love about Piraha is the whistled register and the hummed register of the language. Piraha can be spoken, quote unquote spoken, through whistling, it's sort of a cipher, and the correlations between the spoken register and the whistled register are really fascinating. And there's the hummed register, which kind of works based off of the same principles of converting consonants and vowels and tone and everything into just pitch. But instead of being whistles, it's hums. It's a much more intimate register of the language, which I think is really beautiful. The next language on the list
is number 7, which is Nanda. Nanda is or was spoken in a big pocket around Geraldton, I think, with other similar languages in a sort of mini language family. As a general rule, Australian languages are really phonologically similar. You'll find words that are the same in Perth as they are in Sydney, pretty much. You'll find words that not only are from the same origin, but sound exactly the same from one end of the continent to the other, which is part of what makes Nanda so fascinating, because Nanda is a really, really divergent Australian language.
Next station, Meltham.
Nanda is one of the only Australian languages, as far as I know, that has a glottal stop in it and its phonemic inventory. And weirdly, a lot of the words that have a glottal stop are of unknown origin, which seems to maybe potentially point towards the fact that Nanda and all these other languages might be so different from the other Australian languages because of a substrate language. In other words, another language that was there. In other words, another language that was there before them that influenced them and is consequentially responsible for a lot of their unique and strange features. I really like Nanda not just because of how, interesting and divergent it is, but also because of how much fun it is to study as a result of all of these differences. Alright, I gotta go to the next language on the list now, number 6, which is
Maylands.
Shut up. Number 6,
which is Ta, also known as Kron. Ta is a dialect continuum which I believe is mostly within Botswana, but also a little bit on the eastern bit of Namibia. And if you ever look up a list of, top 5 hardest or most complex or craziest languages in the world, Ta will generally be on it. It's known for having the biggest phoneme inventory of any language, presumably, depending on how you analyze it. I think either way you analyze it, it still has the most phonemes out of any language, but there are a few ways it could either be like in the 80s or over 100 phonemes. There are 3 main reasons that I really like Ta as a language. The first one is just its phonology. Obviously, it's got crazy phonology. Not only are the consonants wild, you've got all of the different places and ways of articulation and all of the different contrasting click consonants. The vowels are crazy. There's contrasting, I think, there's like contrasting between normal voice, like modal voice, and then breathy voice, and then nasalized. There's also a sphincteric vowel contrast of whether the vowels are pronounced sphincterically or not, which is not related to the anatomical human sphincter, but is related to the sphincter of the larynx instead. So don't get any ideas. The second thing I really like about Ta is this one weird feature it has, which is kind of like vowel harmony but for tone, and I really don't understand how it works on like a fine level, but I think the gist of it is that when a word plays a certain role in a clause or sentence, the overall tonal contour of the sentence is determined by the tone class of that word. It's like vowel harmony, but way harder and with tone. Speaking of which, it also has vowel harmony, and it's very complex, and I know that I don't fully understand it, but at the same time, I think it's really cool. But the third thing I love about Ta is the people who work on it. If you ever look up recordings of Ta being spoken, there's this one on YouTube that I think it's from like UCLA Phonetics Lab or something. There's this recording of a guy named Tony Trail who reads out a story, and it starts like Tony Trail is like the biggest name in research for the Ta language, for better or for worse. He was a South African linguist who went out into the bush to talk to the Ta people, and he learnt their language. I believe he became fluent in Ta, in one of the dialects, I think Eastern Ta. In that Ta dictionary that he wrote too, he was one of the few linguists who was willing to record more more taboo words, like even just like crude shit like shit. Just all of these different words. He did not neglect the more taboo or crude seeming elements of language, which a lot of linguists do tend to do, especially in more formal, even like educational contexts. So you'd rarely see someone publish like a dictionary for an endangered language that included such taboo topics. And I think that's something I really admire him for. And then, of course, you can't forget the people who are still working to research and preserve the Ta language today. There's a small team of, I think, mostly German and Dutch linguists who are still working on Ta and doing research, at least throughout the 2010s, and I think they're still working on it today. I actually emailed a few of these people a while ago because there's this website, right? I think it's the Language Archive or something like that, but it had on it basically all of the information on the Tar language, photos, videos, geographical information, everything that this research team had compiled over the years. And it was locked behind an archive. You had to have special permission in order to access it. And so I emailed the team being like, I make videos about languages and I want to make a video about the Tar language, which I will do at some point. Can I have access to the archive? Excluding the parts that give away personal information about the informants and stuff like that. And they said, yeah. They were very polite, they were very pleasant, it was awesome. But no, that was just like a really nice linguistics experience that I had with those people, and I thought I'd bring it up because it's a memory that I really treasure. Alright, enough about Tar. Now we're on to the next language, language number 5, which is
Patois, Jamaican Patois. And I'm like obsessed with English dialects, as you've probably gathered from the nature of my channel. I just love listening to a language that I understand, that's familiar to me, but made unfamiliar. And you've got sort of gradients of that. But I reckon the furthest you can get from actual English while still being kind of intelligible to me as an English speaker is Jamaican Patois. I'm not entirely sure of the history of Jamaica now that I think about it. I'm pretty sure it started off as English-speaking people ruling over a bunch of various language-speaking African slaves. The resultant mishmash of languages and grammar and vocabulary is Jamaican Patois. To the extent of my knowledge, Jamaican Patois is spoken on a continuum with standard English going all the way down to full-on Creole within Jamaica itself. It's so different from English while at the same time still resembling English, and it just completely fascinates me, and I love listening to the language. Now we're moving on to language number 4. We're in the top half of the list now. We're getting to the sharp end. The next language is number 4, which is Swedish. I've only recently developed my fascination with Swedish. It was mainly after I recorded this video a few months ago talking about how weird the phonology of North Germanic languages can be. And I talk about a lot of weird qualities or characteristics of Swedish phonology in it. It's got a lot of things that are relatively rare amongst European languages, like retroflex consonants, for example. And as a fan of Australian languages, I have a soft spot for retroflex consonants. It's got pitch accent, which I find interesting, and it's like, as a language learner, a pitch accent is fun because it's a challenge. It's a bit of a challenge. It's got a few very weird sounds, like the long E sound, which I talk about in the Germanic phonology video, which is probably out by the time you're watching this. There's the long E sound, which is so hard for me to do. It's not compulsory because there are still varieties of Swedish which don't do it. And there's also the SJ or SK or SKJ sound, which sounds kind of like hua in a lot of dialects, but also in some contexts it's h, and in other dialects it's sh. So you get this whole like mismatch of this one interesting consonant. And it's also got that classic ineffable thing of just, I don't know, it sounds good. I think it sounds nice. In terms of languages I want to learn in the future, Swedish is definitely up there alongside Spanish. The next language on the list is going to be number 3, which is Old English. And I'm going to... Oh my god, it's so echoey in here, hold on. I love the thing of English being made unfamiliar. Old English does exactly that in a fun way. It's got that, the mystique, the inherent mystique of being an extinct language, especially one like Old English, which has had so much fantasy stuff drawn inspiration from it. It's got dual pronouns, at least in the earlier forms, which is sick. Dual pronouns are sick and I love them because they're in Australian languages and they're awesome. And it's like English grammar, but if you added all of the fun inflectional stuff that happens in other Germanic languages, it's perfect. I love inflectional grammar. And it's just got that zazz about it, it's got that ineffable zhuzh. It's just a great language, 10 out of 10. The devs really popped off with this one.
Number 2 on the list is Scots. I apologize for how fucking shit this shot looks, but this is what we're working with here, alright? The reasons I love Scots are similar to the reasons that I love Patois, it's the familiar English language made unfamiliar. But there are a few things that give Scots the edge. Patois is, it's an interesting mix of English with other languages, right? But Scots is an alternate evolution of English. I mean, that's literally what it is. It's a sister language to English. I love all the terminology in linguistics, like mother language, daughter language, sister language. All the languages are women. Sorry, men must fucking suck. In my spare time, I like to come up with alternate dialects of English. Like I'll pick a point in the history of English's phonological evolution and I'll make that my point of divergence and sort of come up with my own dialect of English that branches off from that point. Scots is basically that, you know? It's just pre-Great Vowel Shift English, and it's evolved in a completely different direction. And like the retaining of certain sounds as well that modern English has lost, and just like the innovations that are made within Scots, it's all so cool. It's really like a window into English's past, you know? Which is a really weird thing to say because Scots is a modern language that's still spoken, so it doesn't make sense for it to be a window into the past when it's contemporary, but still, you know what I mean? It's like when people see hunter-gatherer cultures around the world and say, wow, look at that relic of the past, as if hunter-gatherer cultures haven't changed in the last 200,000 years of human evolution. And one last advantage that Scots has over Patois is that it's just kind of silly. Wow, this purple is fucking shite.
Now, before we get to the final entry, I'm just going to go over some honourable mentions. Spanish, this is the language I mentioned I want to learn. I can't really be bothered at the moment, but I'm taking some units on it at uni. It just hasn't got that zazz to get it into the top 10, you know? Cantonese, I love Cantonese. Cantonese just sounds nice, and it's such a challenge to try and learn and try and pronounce. But it's just not got that zazz. Arabic as well, I just have this fascination with. It's an interesting language, but I know I could never be bothered to learn it because it's the way that its grammar works. The forms of words change, but it's the vowels in between the consonants that change. It's such a barrier for me to overcome if I want to learn it, and at the moment I can't be fucked. And also the uvular consonants in Arabic give me a lot of trouble because if I pronounce any uvular consonants for too long, then my uvula starts to hurt. So I can't probably any attempt I had at learning Arabic would just be fruitless, or I would have a really buff uvula at the end of it. Welsh is the language of my ancestors, and probably, well, some of my ancestors at least. It sounds beautiful, and it's phonology. It's mainly the phonology that gets me in Welsh. It's got all these sounds that I love, like the dental fricatives and the sh sound. I just love that. Next up is Esperanto. Esperanto has just got that zazz, but at the same time it's not that interesting. So it's the inverse of languages like Cantonese. A lot of people don't know that Esperanto actually has a really interesting history, which I know nothing about and which I can't tell you anything about because I don't know anything about it. Tokipona, yay! Everyone loves Tokipona. It's just cool. It's just sweet, you know. It's sick. I love it. Everyone loves it. And the final honourable mention before we get on to our number one place is Gothic. It's a Germanic language, so it's got Germanic phonology and Germanic grammar, so that's always fun. But what really sells me on the Gothic language is that it was spoken by Goths. I mean, Goths are cool. Gothic's got that zazz, and in this case, the zazz is definitely effable. I can explain where it comes from. It's literally just the fact that it's called Gothic. That's just a cool name, and so my subconscious latches onto it. And then I look at the actual language itself, and I'm like, not bad. And last but definitely not least, actually last but most, really, is my favourite language of all time. Now, I get how inherently stupid it is to try and rank languages and say that one's better than the other and to try and pick favourites of languages, but I say this with absolute certainty. Bastard? My absolute favourite language, without question, is Badimaya. Badimaya is a language that I used to know better and have kind of forgotten a lot of, but I could probably pick it up again really quickly. Badimaya is the Indigenous Australian language that I grew up with. I didn't so much grow up around people speaking it. I mean, my dad uses it a lot, uses words from Badimaya a lot in day-to-day speech, and most of the places around me, that I was growing up with, didn't have European names, they had Badimaya names. So Badimaya was always there around me in my childhood. And Badimaya, along with, Russian, and like I talked about earlier, my general interest in learning languages as a teenager, Badimaya got me into linguistics properly. After I'd already been interested in languages, learning languages for some time, I decided to have a go at learning Badimaya because it was the local language and I'd grown up around it and I was curious to see if I could do it. And a movie had recently been filmed on my family's station it's called The Furnace, and it's a great movie, and in the movie they speak Badimaya.
Like they got a team together, they got a crack team together making this movie, and they tried to figure out, they got the script and then they translated it into Badimaya for these certain scenes, and they got the actors, they taught them how to pronounce everything, and they fully did some scenes in this movie that were fully in Badimaya. It was so sick. And so I thought, I want to learn Badimaya, I'll go and contact these people. So I went to the team of people. I found who they were on the internet, who had done the translation, and I tracked them down and I got their phone number, I got their email, and I emailed them, I emailed one of the scientists, being like, hey, how do I learn Badimaya? And he sent me back a copy of Leonie Dunn's really, preliminary and not actually that good sketch grammar of Badimaya, which is such a good resource. It had everything I needed. It had vocabulary, it had example sentences, it had stories recorded. It's not a very good grammar, but still, it was invaluable to me trying to learn the language. Unfortunately, it was a sketch grammar. It was all written in linguistic jargon that I didn't understand. And so in order to understand the sketch grammar and in order to achieve what I wanted to do, which was learn Badimaya, I had to learn the linguistic jargon first. And I had to learn what split ergativity meant. I had to learn what ergativity meant. I learned about all of these different linguistic things, all of these different ideas within linguistics and about linguistics itself on the way. And I fell into the linguistics YouTube rabbit hole as I was learning, and eventually I was like, linguistics is really cool. And so this was like 2 or 3 years ago now that I started trying to learn Badimaya. And that journey of me realizing, hey, linguistics is kind of cool, sort of brought me on a whole thing. It took me on a journey into the realm of linguistics, and then at some point I posted a video on my YouTube channel of me trying to speak Badimaya. It sucked, so about a year later I did it again, and in doing that I created Ria's Language Academy. So there you go, the 2 languages that are responsible for the existence of this channel are Russian and Badimaya, each one holding different purposes and amounts of responsibility. But yeah, not only is the Badimaya language, a cool language with cool features, and it's close to home and close to my heart, it's also the reason that I'm doing YouTube and the reason that I've made this channel and I'm currently have just surpassed 2,000 subscribers. And so there you go, for probably illogical reasons, but I don't care if they're illogical, Badimaya is my favorite language because not only is it close to heart, close to home, and awesome as a language, but it's also the reason that I'm doing this right now, that I'm doing YouTube at all. So there you go, there's my list of the top 10, my top 10 favorite languages. I started recording this in like October or November or something like that, maybe even September, I can't really remember. Started in November, I really can't remember. I'm a poet and I didn't even realize that was the case. I recorded the intro to this video at the same time that I recorded the non-binary languages video. And now I am past 2,000 subscribers. That's crazy, that's so cool. No, I've been working on this video for a while, and so I did what I do best, which is co-opt video ideas for subscriber specials. So yeah, thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing if you are subscribed, and if you're not, what the fuck are you doing? Subscribe right now! Yeah, I'm at 2,000 subscribers, that's cool. Big thanks to me for doing all the work, am I right? No, but honestly, I'm really happy that my hard work is paying off and people are starting to notice my channel and pay attention to it. And thank you guys for actually giving me the time of day and giving me a chance and checking out my channel. I know that my videos they don't have much mass appeal and they're not always the most polished things in the universe, but they're still cool. So yeah, for the absolute final time, thank you for watching and subscribing. I'm gonna shut the fuck up now, and I will see you in either 1 week or 2 weeks because my schedule is bonkers. Bye bye.